Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody around the world. We thank you for joining this latest GMAT Club session, how to navigate the MBA waitlist. So I know that you've probably been eagerly awaiting for the last couple of weeks now your MBA application results. There were some big ones. Harvard, the big, really big one came in yesterday, and we're really kind of down to where we're just waiting on a couple more schools. MIT Sloan always runs a week or two later. I think it's April 4th this year. LBS coming up in the next week plus as well, and that sort of thing. So here we are. Your results are coming in. You've been on this probably long journey. I know a lot of the people we were talking about with our HBS results yesterday, we started working with, and we were looking back and almost kind of reminiscing in positive instances, in this case, about when we first spoke. And it was, 8-9 months ago and that sort of thing. So you've probably been on a similarly long journey. You probably took the GMAT or the GRE even before then. And these results come in, and here you are. And it's, did I get in? Did I not get in? Did I get money somewhere? Am I waitlisted? And that waitlist result, I know it can feel a little bit disappointing. I know it can feel a little bit like purgatory, but we're here to talk about that today and what you can do to navigate that and maximize your chances of getting in. Because I know it can feel a little bit uncertain and a little bit like, all right, well, what do I do? What do I do now? My name is Greg Guglielmo. I'm the founder of Avanti Prep. We welcome you to visit avantiprep.com. We work with MBA applicants and other sort of related, primarily MBA applicants, but other sometimes other MBA adjacent type programs as well. Masters in management, masters in finance, masters in business analytics, but almost all really MBA, top tier MBA applicants to programs around the world. So we welcome you to check out our website. We do work with applicants. I'll just flip ahead to what's the last page of this little presentation. We'll come back to this later on. But we do work with applicants on waitlist strategy and waitlist updates. Waitlist strategy and waitlist update reviews. You can check some of that out on our services page and on our testimonials. There are people with whom, we didn't work throughout the course of the applications, and then they reach out when they're at exactly this juncture, which is what do I do now? I'm waitlisted. Help me strategize. And I'd like somebody to review the overtures that I send in, or the updates, often kind of like mini, I don't want to say essays is a little too strong of a word, but written updates that you're providing to the schools. And we'll talk about what could go in those and what the cadence of those could or should be. And it does vary a little bit by school. So we'll go through all of that. If you reference this video, so the best way to sign up or to inquire is to email info@avantiprep.com. If you reference this video, say I joined the video, you will automatically qualify for our lowest hourly services pricing tier, which is roughly a 30% discount relative to if you were just signing up anew, for regular application services. And the rationale there is, look, you've come this far. Even if we didn't work with you before, you've come this far. You're on this kind of precipice. We want to make it, so that, or invite you or discount you, if you will, to try to give you that chance, or to maximize that chance of getting in off the wait list. What are those chances of getting in off the wait list? Before we go into some of these steps, and a year or two ago, I put together a 12-step guide for GMAT Club's 2021. I put together a 12-step waitlist guide or waitlist article. I wrote the waitlist chapter, I guess you could say, of GMAT Club's MBA application guide, which covers all manner of things and all elements of the application process. I believe it's published every 2 years. Maybe I'll drop a link to it I'll put it in the private chat, and perhaps our host, if available, can put it on the screen. But that's the GMAT Club guide. Again, tons of pages in there, covers a lot of different things. On page 157, you'll be able to find the waitlist guide, which will be a nice accompaniment, and probably even, well, I guess I was going to say more detailed accompaniment. I think we actually covered more detail verbally like this, but at least a written accompaniment to what we talk about today. The opening paragraph, by the way, not to like sit here and read, do like a live reading for you, but kind of evokes some of the feelings that I was just referencing, which is that after countless months spent preparing for the GMAT or GRE, researching schools and attending info sessions, visits, and coffee chats, developing your story and career goals, drafting and redrafting and refining your essays and resume, managing your recommenders, navigating schools' online applications, prepping for interviews and videos, and sometimes even submitting more essays if you were invited to interview, you were waitlisted. So after all that, after all those months and all that work, you were waitlisted. And it is understandably a disappointing and anticlimactic result. I used the word purgatory before. And even a little bit more frustrating now is there's more work to do. The wait list is usually not kind of like in a one and done. I'm going to submit one update and then I'm done. It's usually something that spreads over weeks, if not months, and usually requires, we'll talk about whether there's certain magic bullets in certain instances, but it usually is going to require multiple overtures, multiple updates, and some sort of cadence. I mean, it's not a never-ending well, for some people it is actually never-ending. They just end up on the wait list and they never get in. They never get rejected nor get in off the wait list. So I guess by that token, it's never-ending. But from an overture perspective, it can become a little more finite. So let's think about that. The waitlist acceptance rate landscape, by the way, what are your chances of getting in? That data is very difficult to come by. Even doing this now for quite some time and being as immersed, constantly immersed in it, that data is tough to come by. I think that if you looked around, official data at least is very tough to come by. That is held closely by schools. But if we sniff around, and at least oftentimes GMAT club data, self-reported GMAT club data, are the largest and best samples that we'll find in the hundreds and even thousands of applicants. And if we look at that, the data suggests that across, let's say, the US top 16 MBA programs, waitlist acceptance rates average something like 8 to 10%. That sounds low, right? And I think for some of the tougher schools, it's even a little lower than that. But it varies, and different schools, some schools intentionally kind of build, or at least reputationally build, bigger wait lists. Duke Fuqua and Chicago Booth would be two that I would cite. I'm not sure that I've ever seen that printed or published or announced by them, but in my experience, which again is, I would qualify at this point as extensive, and just the constancy and year over year of that. And if you read again on GMAT Club, on forums, Booth and Fuqua, I'll just point those two out. Reputationally, maybe they'd refute this, but reputationally, anecdotally, and I think even beyond anecdotally now, because there's enough of a sample here to make an assessment, they carry large wait lists. But I think if they're kind of putting people through the gauntlet of can they cut it here and do they really want to come here? If you make those overtures, maybe you have a little bit of a higher chance than low single digits or something like that. So not a very high percentage, but keep this in mind when we look at that waitlist data. And I said 8 to 10% if we use self-reported GMAT club data across the top 16 US MBA programs, just as an example. But keep in mind that not everyone who gets waitlisted, there's a little bit of a silver lining here maybe. Not everyone who gets waitlisted actually tries to get in. So if the denominator that produces our 8 to 10% includes everybody who's waitlisted, not everybody in that denominator is actually trying. So that could give us a little bit of at least like a psychological boost. I guess on a similar token, many waitlisted applicants don't really know how to navigate the waitlist. Some just kind of sit there with their hands in their pockets. So I think beyond that, the 8 to 10%, okay, that's the best figure if I had to cite one that I would that I've seen. But I think there can be a little more silver lining with that, and hopefully some cause, at least some cause to dig in and try here. So what does trying mean? What can we look at? What can we focus on? Let's just look. There's not a ton really here in the presentation other than the 12 steps that I put in that same guide, but we'll talk through these and try to bring to life verbally and through your questions. And I'll just see if there's questions along the way as well. Certainly at the end, we'll do questions. But if there are questions along the way that seem relevant to what we're talking about in that moment, we could cover that as well. So the first thing I have written on here, beyond the context of what I just described, is to read and respect the school's waitlist FAQs. If you're waitlisted by a given program, they're going to send you a PDF, an FAQ, a waitlist instruction form. And it's going to kind of lay the groundwork for the rules of the road when you're on the waitlist. Where do you, to whom do you address your updates? Where do you send them? Some of them will say what you're allowed to submit and what you're not allowed to submit. So, examples of that would be, booth I mentioned them before. Well, when you're waitlisted at booth, they require another 60-second video. I say another because you had to do a 60-second video when you were invited to interview as well, if you have been waitlisted after interviewing. So, with booth, they actually prescribe the 60-second video. It doesn't mean that's the only thing you can submit. They also invite an updated resume, and there's a little bit of a gray area as well, and we could talk about that gray areas of other updates and other things I might want to submit. Cornell Johnson used to ask for a waitlist action plan. So you actually had to submit, a lot of times it was even in slide form. I believe they've gotten rid of this, but you had to submit a waitlist action plan. But anyway, long story short, examples aside, read and respect the waitlist FAQs. When applicants if any of you out there email info@avantiprep.com and are seeking waitlist services, I will actually ask, the first thing I'll ask is, can you please send me the waitlist instructions? Because as many times as I or we have, of course, worked with all these different, worked on applications and with applicants to all these different schools, the waitlist FAQs can vary quite a bit. Some schools, what you're basically figuring out is what for that school is required versus encouraged versus permitted versus prohibited in terms of submissions and updates. Some schools will allow or encourage an extra letter of recommendation, while others will explicitly state that submitting one is against the rules. And again, you got to size this up. Are you're supposed to submit at Wharton? You submit your waitlist updates to a certain email address. At Columbia, it's to a certain person in admissions. For a lot of other schools, it's through their portal. But then, you say to yourself, okay, but if I'm doing it in the portal, should I also email my admissions contact? You get into all sorts of strategic things like that. So first thing first, read and respect the waitlist FAQs. My personal feeling, by the way, I mentioned gray area a moment ago. I usually say my general feeling is that if the waitlist instructions do not explicitly state that you can't do something, if they don't explicitly prohibit something, like that's an extra letter of recommendation or something, you usually can submit it. I'm not suggesting to go wild and crazy with it, but there are schools out there, here's an example, booth requires a 60-second video when you're on the wait list, and they give you 2 or 3 topics to choose from. I've seen other people at other schools whose waitlist FAQs make no mention of submitting a video. They neither require it, nor invite it, nor prohibit it. I've seen people use that as kind of a creative and more personalized, more energized, more creative, more unique way to submit a waitlist update or a waitlist overture. So there would be an example. I'm not saying you have to run out now and do a video for every school you're waitlisted at, but that's a kind of a gray area example. It's neither explicitly required nor explicitly prohibited. Is this something that I think, any of this stuff, you're not just doing it to do it. You want it to be of substance and meaningful and potentially needle moving. So as long as it's not prohibited, and as long as it's going to fit those criteria, where it actually provides real information and real substance to the adcom, and is something you put thought into, and you're not bombarding them and that whole thing, I think usually it'll fit the bill. You should also, by the way, go out there and talk to this is going to bleed a little bit into what's number 4 there on the page, but go out and talk to students at that school who have been waitlisted before. You'll usually be able to find, some schools will even kind of like sort of connect you with them. Other schools have videos or blog posts. Or if you have, from waitlisted candidates in the past and what they did to navigate the waitlist, GMAT Club is always a fantastic resource. There are chats of people who are waitlisted. You could look at the prior years, calling all, 2021 applicants to a certain school if you're looking, a year back. And you'll see a lot of tidbits. And I think ideally you'd be able then to connect with and actually have a conversation with a couple of people at that school who got in off the wait list in previous years. So that could almost be, we got our numbers on the page here. That could almost be a separate thing. It sort of is captured, I guess, by number 4. But talk to people at these schools. You should be doing that anyway. You should have done that anyway. And now, you should be doing it anew or another, kind of again, now that you're on the wait list. But I think in particular, trying to speak with people who have gotten in off the wait list at that school in previous years to gather some tidbits and tips and what the experience was like for them. Triangulating that information is always helpful. Another step in this process, another kind of logistical step, is to accept your spot on the wait list. Don't forget to do that. I know maybe it's a little bit self-explanatory, but go in and accept it. One of the reasons I have it written here too is that there are certain schools where, I'm thinking of Tuck as an example, if they still have this in there, in their portal. But historically, when you're waitlisted at Tuck and you have to accept your spot on the waitlist, you actually have to start, like, they're already asking you for information. Like, what are the 3 things that draw you to Tuck when you're accepting your spot on the waitlist? And there's a little box, a text box then for a blurb or for something written for you to submit. So for most schools, the initial step of accepting the spot on the waitlist is sort of like programmatic. You're just saying yes. But there are others out there where it's a little bit more than that. So you would want to be thoughtful in doing that. It's almost like your first, for some schools, it's just click a button, I accept my spot on the waitlist. For other schools, it's accepting your spot on the waitlist and sort of making your first overture at the same time. And we could talk about what, an initial overture might look like. Before we leave this page, let's make sure to do that. So that first one, it wouldn't be the mindless at all. If it's just click the button and I accept my spot on the wait list, great, easy. And then you could think about your overtures and what your first outreach is going to be. But for those other schools like Tuck in the example I've given, or other schools where, you might have to send an email to an AdCom person or to a waitlist inbox when you accept your spot on the waitlist, I would be more thoughtful about what could go into that. Are you going to describe maybe an action plan? I know I mentioned before that Cornell used to require an actual action plan. Even if schools don't require, most schools don't require that. But if you do have to put information in, or it's an email, so you've got kind of a blank slate, let's do more than just say, I accept my spot on the wait list. Let's actually maybe express what you're going to do, the 3 or 4 things you're going to do to improve your candidacy over the next period of time. And then those become the points that you submit. And we'll make sure we cover that in a little more depth in a moment. Number 3 on this page, consider the implications of accepting your spot on the wait list. So, if you do that, we're in round 2 right now, you're almost certainly, if you were accepted elsewhere, going to have to deposit at that other school. So there's some financial cost, I guess you could call it in this case. Why is that? Because you're just not going to hear, almost very, very unlikely, unless your GMAT score was the issue and you blow a new score out of the water in the next week or two and they just boom accept you. I think that would be pretty rare. Even just the timing of when schools do this probably wouldn't line up like that. You're very, very likely, if you're going to pursue a certain wait list or two and you're already in somewhere else and you like that other school enough, but maybe you still want to go for these wait lists, you will have to almost certainly, very likely, deposit at that other school. So be aware of that. Be aware if you're if you're an international applicant, or if if you are from outside the country that you'll be studying in, there could be visa implications to this. For some people, there could be loan implications. I'm talking about kind of timing, and what gets documented. The school that you're attending oftentimes gets documented in these things. Loans, I mentioned as well. Like a lot of times people start in the next couple of weeks really looking at, or right after they deposit, or even now they're starting to think about it, because you're seeing where you got in and what your scholarship offers were, and scholarship negotiations, by the way. That's a little bit of an aside, but don't forget to, where possible, try to negotiate a little bit. That's something we advise on as well. And those are overtures that we review, or interactions that we can review and strategize on with you as well. But people are lining those ducks up now. And a lot of times as you go through the loan process, you need to say the school that you're attending, and then you get waitlisted, and then you get, or then you get in off the wait list in 2 months. Maybe just ask the borrower, well, what if my school changes? If it's a comparable school, by the way, in like the same country, I don't think it should be an issue. But just a couple of implications, logistical implications again, related to deposits, visas, loans, life, moving, where you're going to move, where your flight's going to go. Are you flying to Chicago or New York, or San Francisco, or whatever the case may be. So you can think about that. Roommates. I mean, you're going to have attended probably accepted students weekends or admitted students weekends, and you're like probably eventually start looking for housing. These things can run into the summer. We see people get waitlisted and it's June, July. You'll even hear stories of people getting in off the wait list in August. I think that late might get kind of unlikely for international students because of all the unraveling and visa stuff that would happen. But it can run, obviously sooner better for you. But these are just some implications, life and logistical implications to think about. So the what, the how, and the when of the waitlist process. You can see it written there on the page, but look, you want to reflect on, analyze, and solicit feedback regarding your profile and application. Schools, if they waitlisted you, they like you. That's it. There is a silver lining to that. I know it can be frustrating. Why couldn't they just accept me? They like you. They see things in you. But there are going to be a couple of things behind the scenes, and maybe even not behind the scenes, maybe already in your own head, that you had pointed out or been focused on, that are holding them back from accepting you. Could it be low test? And we're going to get into some of what this could be, but could it be low test scores, no quant or business background, or lack of coursework, horrific grades in a couple of key classes during college? Could it be unclear goals, or underdeveloped, underdeveloped essays, unclear goals, undeveloped or unarticulated ways that you can contribute or uniquely contribute to the program, a poor understanding or articulation of the fit with that program? Could it be, a lack of leadership experience, lack of promotions, underwhelming recommendations? There could be a whole host of things. So you have to self-diagnose, self in quotes, because you should solicit feedback on that. You don't have to do it like you're not there all by yourself trying to figure this out. But you want to diagnose that. A lot of times you might know in your gut already what it is, but I think it can help to solicit the perspective and feedback of, I was going to say friends, but I think you probably want them to be friends who know their way around MBA applications. So like a friend who's at a school, or a similar level type school. Doesn't have to be the exact would be even better, the exact school that you're trying to get in off the wait list to. But if you have a friend who's in kind of like a really good MBA program also, have them take a look, talk to them, get on the phone. If you built a friendship or a relationship with students or alums from the program while you were going, or even again other programs, while you're going through this process, have people like talk to admissions consultants as well. Post in forums. You don't have to do like all these things and go crazy with it. But I think having a few key perspectives and triangulating those perspectives, if you don't already kind of have a gut feel on it, is super important in terms of reflecting, analyzing, solicit feedback, because the goal here is to crystallize. The goal here is to use the word action plan a few times. The goal here is to crystallize like 3 or 4 concrete things that you can do, and updates or overtures that you can provide, or overtures you can make to an admissions committee to try to fill those soft spots or address those soft spots in your profile. In parentheses here, I do have written occasionally AdCom. What I mean by that is there are some schools out there that will actually give you feedback, or even invite that. I'm thinking of Tuck, Darden. Other schools won't, and they're very, very like specific about that. They will not give anyone feedback, but there are a couple of schools, handful. Again, this is going to be in the Waitlist FAQs, so make sure you read and engage and read those thoroughly on a school specific basis to understand the do's and the don'ts and who will do what. If a certain school offers feedback and you're waitlisted, you want to go there, that's a must. Like, you just looks weird if you don't, and also why wouldn't you? And that call is, yes, it's a feedback call, but it's also, I don't want to call it an interview, but like, yeah, it's a feedback call. It's definitely not an interview, but that's an impression call as well. That's a relationship call. You're going to be speaking with somebody in admissions, probably the waitlist manager, or at least a decision maker in admissions, who has evaluated your candidacy and can provide specific guidance regarding what steps you can do. And they'll offer that. They'll almost so instead of, they kind of removes the mystery of what 2 to 4 things do I need to focus on. They're probably going to tell you what those are. So that's definitely valuable and important. You want to marry your own reflection. This is number 5 on the page there. Marry your own reflection and whatever feedback you've heard, either from those friends or those MBA students that you know, or maybe in some cases the admissions committee, back to the waitlist FAQs. So if I heard from, the AdCom that my, I don't know, my quant scores my quant background felt a little thin, and my quant scores felt a little low, and my goals felt under articulated or not specific enough. And I said, okay, those seem like the 2 main kind of things. And, sometimes you'll even get a little tidbit like, you might have thought about considering somebody else as your recommender. That's like a read between the lines comment. Ooh, one of my recommenders wasn't great. And maybe maybe behind the scenes you also got promoted. Maybe they don't highlight that, but you also got promoted. Well, right there, between your own self-reflection and these kind of feedback conversations, you've just distilled like 4 things that you could act on or action, and then provide updates to the school about in the coming weeks. And, again, in this hypothetical example, it would be, I somehow have to address or improve my quant score. I'm either going to retake the exam or take some sort of course. We could talk about options for that. What did I say? One of the my goals were under articulated. Okay, I'm going to have to take another kind of written at bat at that in one of my update overtures to the school. One of my, somebody kind of said as a side comment, this would have to be an AdCom because no one else would have seen it, or maybe you just felt in your gut one of your recommenders was weak, and okay, I maybe should have thought about somebody else there. And then 4th was, I got promoted at work. Maybe they didn't even mention that, but you want to share that as an update. There are 4 nice, now you've lined up 4 potential action items. What you'd want to do though is take that feedback or take that reflection and map it back to the waitlist FAQs. Well, maybe a certain school doesn't allow additional recommendations. If they don't, then you can't address that one piece. But take a look, reflect, analyze, hear the feedback, and then map it back to the waitlist FAQs. And here's a good place, and I kind of just did it there, and I've referenced it a couple of times, but action plan, waitlist action plan. What are the 2, 3, or 4 things, concrete action steps that I'm going to take or should take in my specific case? It varies greatly by applicant. Because the things that we're acting on here are the things that are weak or soft in the profile of you, a specific applicant. What are those 2, 3, or 4 things? And what's my kind of execution plan with those? What I like to do, though, here is to actually, I mentioned earlier that Cornell used to require an action plan slide or page. I kind of like that. So even, it doesn't have to be a slide, but like if you, let's say a certain school asks you to accept your spot on the wait list by emailing a certain person at admissions or a waitlist inbox. I would, in that email, before sending that email, have done this reflection and tried to crystallize these action steps. Send the email to accept your spot on the waitlist. Make sure you do that by the deadline to accept your spot on the waitlist. And then in that email, don't just say, I accept my spot on the waitlist. Put in, like, these are the things, upon having reflected on my application strengths and or having reflected on my application and solicited feedback from whoever, I intend to provide the admissions committee. I intend to take the following steps and or provide the admissions committee with the following updates in the coming weeks. And then, bullet them out or number them out or paragraph them out. You're not writing a novel here, but it's like a plan. I'm really interested, and you don't have to say it this way, but here's how serious I am about getting in off this wait list. I'm about to attack or submit these 3 or 4 things. And then cascade those updates in over the next several weeks. The next number on the page. So that's a nice, I think, way to start things off and to kind of express your interest and frame both for yourself and now for the admissions committee what you're going to do, the kind of multi-pronged attack that you're going to launch here. Again, I think it's often 2 to 4 type things, maybe 3 or 4 type things. Mind the review dates, number 6 on the page. Mind the review dates. They will help inform your timing. Again, here, it's going to be different for every school or for many schools. Look at the FAQs. If you do have any dialogue with somebody in admissions, inquire about it. Some schools will say that they review the wait list periodically, kind of vague. Others will review it on an ongoing basis. Most will say, by the way, they don't rank the wait list, which is true. It's not like they have like some exact rank order behind the scenes. But yeah, some will review waitlist, re-review applicants on the waitlist periodically. Others will do it on an ongoing basis. Many will do it like with the next review period. When they look at round 3 applicants or something. Other times you kind of have to read between the lines. Also, like here again, like some sleuthing can help. Like go to GMAT Club, go to those like waitlist forums or calling all applicant forums from previous years. You'll usually be able to sleuth, or kind of like you feel like Sherlock Holmes a little bit. Booth's round 2 decisions go out on such and such a date, and it seems like in previous years they've given their first like waitlist rejections or invitations to interview or acceptances like 2 weeks before that. Like you'll be able a lot of time, and it can change year to year and it'll be extremely different from school to school, but you'll sometimes be able to pick up on those patterns if you want to take that kind of Sherlock Holmes route with it. But having at least some feel for that can inform for when schools are going to take their next look at you or at waitlisted candidates, can inform when you want to make sure your updates are submitted. If you feel like your GMAT or GRE score was really what's holding you back, maybe you're from an overrepresented applicant pool and applied to an M7 with a 720 GMAT, which is a fantastic score, and is right there, sort of around the average for most, let's say, M7 schools, a little bit lower, but that you're like getting if you're from a hyper overrepresented applicant pool and you got waitlisted at an M7 program with a 720 GMAT, they like you. They definitely like you, because the average for your peer group at that school, the average GMAT score is probably like a 750 or 755, and a 720 is probably below the 10th percentile for your app. I'm talking about hyper overrepresented applicant pools in this case. So if you got the 720 and you're like, all right, I'm pretty sure here they must it seems like they like me. They might, even if it was one of these schools that gives you feedback. I can't think of any M7s that do that. But I don't know. You just talk to Tuck and they're like, hey, it's your GMAT score. They would say it a little differently than that. But you could say to yourself, all right, it looks like they conduct their next review in 4 weeks. Let me make sure I retake the GMAT and update them about my new score before that, if you could fit your prep in and get a good score by then. And again, this isn't easy. This is like so much easier said than done. It's a lot of work. It kind of stinks a little bit, but if you really want to get into that school, I would wrestle with these kind of steps. And again, they will vary, but knowing those dates can also help. Like if you are an international applicant and you know that you might have visa timing considerations and things like that. I've seen people in the past say to themselves, I really kind of have to know where I'm going by like a self-imposed date. So they say, you know what? I want these are like the 2 or 3 things I want to make sure I at least try to do and update the school on before then. And I'm going to give that my best shot and hope that they render me a decision by that first review date or that next review date. And after that, I'm just going to attend the school that I'm already in at. But get a feel for that timing, get a feel for the review cadence of the school. Again, it'll vary from a little bit from program to program, but at least then you can time out your own updates. Make sure you get them in. You don't have to get all them in by that first review period. That's another little side comment, by the way. You don't want to like waste all your, I mean, I guess it's going to vary from person to person. The person I was just describing who has to kind of self-impose that date and needs to know where they're heading by, some self-imposed date. Well, they should get all their updates in before that time period. But, other people, if there were like 3 or 4 things you wanted to attack them, provide some cadence to that. A lot of times I see people, is it every 2 weeks maybe that you provide those updates? So you map out, these are the 4 things I'm going to do. Here's out every 2 weeks, or again, adjusted a little bit with an eye toward the review periods for the given school. Let me deliver each of those overtures. And that way, okay, if I have 4 things that I do and they're each 2 weeks apart, I have ammunition for 2 months of being on the wait list, 8 weeks worth of being on the wait list. But again, adjust within that based on, that might be like a default, but adjust within that based on when the wait list reviews are occurring at that school. And try to save, like some people go through that. They're like, all right, these are my 4 main things that I'm going to update them about, but I'm going to save like a 5th backup thing in case I'm like still on the wait list in June or still on the wait list thereafter. So you can kind of figure out what those be. So what could those be? Waitlist update categories to consider. This is how they're in that GMAT Club waitlist article that I mentioned earlier. This is how I've broken them out there. Some of them are kind of like fused together here, right? Like number 7 on here is GMAT GRE score updates and or coursework. I mean, you could kind of break those into their own categories as well. Professional community and leadership updates. You could, in other words, it's kind of subjective how exactly we number or cluster these. Let me actually go to the next page here. Hopefully it's not too hard to read. I broke them out in a little bit more of a list form here. Let's talk about some of these. So again, how did we get here? We're on the wait list. We're trying to figure out now what's my waitlist strategy? What are the things that, as I reflect on my own strengths and weaknesses as an applicant, strengths and soft spots as an applicant, as I solicit feedback from others who have gone through this process, or who maybe got in off the wait list at that school in previous years, or maybe in some cases this is actual feedback from the school itself. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 concrete action steps I'm going to take? Again, I do encourage, where possible, an initial overture or expression of interest. And these are kind of like brief-ish business emails, concise, expressing your plans, and then subsequently providing those updates. I used the hypothetical of every 2 weeks thereafter, mapping them out thereafter. So what's on this page? Okay, the first bullet we just talked about, reflecting on soft spots and creating a waitlist action plan. Additional courses, for example, if you don't have a quant or business background. So the second and third bullet on here, I should almost number these, but I'll just highlight them. Those 2 that I'm highlighting right here, this takes self-awareness and reflection, and kind of like a feel for, you can have self-awareness about it, but you also kind of need a feel for the application and admissions landscape. That's why, with some of this, it's hard to just ask like any old friend or any old family member. I think you really kind of need somebody who has insight into the MBA application game. That could be somebody who's gone through the process, a friend who's at a certain school, a friend who's at the school you're trying to get into, an admissions consultant, GMAT club forum, whatever. Because you might feel like, hey, 720 in that example I was using before, 720 is a good score, but like, and it is a fantastic score. Kudos to you for achieving it, but it might not be the score that gets you waitlisted if you're from an overrepresented applicant pool at an M7 program, where your peer group at that school usually has 750s. And so 720, as great of a score as it is a sub 10th percentile in context of your applicant pool. So that's like finger on the pulse with that stuff. And it's, some of this is like, know it when you see it. So it's really case by case. And that's why you have to strategize about it. But if you feel like the score is low, look at class profile pages. You'll see average scores. You'll see many times middle 80% scores. But again, you kind of have to know also, like, what are the usual scores for somebody from, big finance to that school, or from my home country, or my applicant pool, or however you want to kind of frame it out. Sometimes you have a nice GMAT score, but like the quant score is low and it's not buttressed. Let's say maybe you were like a liberal arts major in undergrad who never took any business or quant courses, and then you worked in a job that was not particularly quant heavy. And then you have a good overall GMAT score, but your quant score on the GMAT is low. We should probably, from that, triangulate that an action step for you could be to somehow further represent your quant abilities. By the way, this is stuff that if you rewind like a year, probably nobody watching this right now is applying this fall. But if you're a reapplicant, let's say, if the waitlist doesn't work out and you end up reapplying, this is stuff that you'd want to have really like thought about and addressed 6 months, 12 months before you apply. But if you didn't and you're waitlisted now, it's stuff that we're going to try to retroactively build on or address. We'd have to think through our menu of options here in this hypothetical. This person who had like the soft spot in quant, do they have the appetite and the desire to go to this school enough that they're willing to retake the GMAT? That's a bigger undertaking to try to boost that quant score. That's an option. There's always going to be menus of options. And they're each going to have pros and cons and different levels of difficulty and different levels of time commitment, but also different value with a school. I have, by the way, seen this hypothetical that I keep mentioning of the overrepresented applicant with a 720 applying to an M7 program. They really like that applicant, but something's holding them back. We feel like it's probably the quant score. Or the GMAT score in this case. I've seen people boost the score by 30 points. They had 3 or 4 action steps they were going to take on their on their waitlist action plan. They boost their GMAT score by 30 points. They submit the updated score. 2 days later, they get accepted. I have seen that. That's like, I think, one of the few magic bullets. And schools probably don't love to own up to that. They love to talk about how it's holistic, and it is. I mean, they are evaluating candidates holistically, but if the score is what's holding you back and you boost the score, that's probably the closest thing. It's not always going to work like that, but that's probably the closest thing to a magic bullet, if provided that's like the one issue that it was for you. And again, that it's going to vary by person. But if this other hypothetical, this other applicant, let's say with soft quant, you could retake the exam, try to boost the quant. You could look at certain types of courses or coursework. This is a little tougher because it takes the more substantial courses, the ones that I think would needle move for the school, can take a little more time to do or complete. There's always, HBX Core E, the Certificate of Readiness, has become very, very popular in the last few years, all the way through discrete courses. Maybe you never took stats or calc at all, and schools want to see that as kind of foundational. Again, these are things that really I hope you would have done or thought about 6 to 12 months ago. But if we're working on them now, let's see what we could do. Those are, again, a little tougher because some of those are going to be like 15 weeks long. Some people still do that, and then they just tell the school that they're doing it, because then at least then the school knows you're going to be done with those by the time you enroll. So you could enroll for the course, show them that you enrolled, provide them, an update when you get your midterm result. You hopefully get an A on that. So there's this menu of options all the way through MBA math. I would probably put MBA math on like the lighter. I know they have a somewhat formal affiliation with certain programs. Certain programs will even use MBA math. MBA math, though, is kind of, what is it, like 15 hours or something? It's probably on the the lighter side relative to like full on courses. But some people, plenty of people when they're on the waitlist are like, I gotta do something here. I want to show them I'm on this. Just the point is, think about what the menu of options are. And I've just walked through a few of those if you feel like light on quant in this example. Professional and community updates. These are, if the two that I just highlighted previously, the GMAT, GRE, and the additional courses, are a little more black and white, these are a little more gray, the two that I'm highlighting here. So, did you get promoted? I guess that's kind of black and white. But did you get invited to lead, or did you raise your hand to lead something at work? Did something that you were working on come to fruition, and now you know what the impact was? Did you do something or deepen your involvement, or some, I don't know, big event for a nonprofit that you're on the board of, a big event that you were spearheading, and it was slated to happen in March. It finally happened after you applied. Update them about there. I say gray because it's more like, it's not like I took a test and here's my updated score. I guess, again, the promotion may be a little more black and white, but even that, the figuring out what you're going to tell them, you're trying to figure out what's going to go into like an update email or an update letter. It's kind of a mini essay. You want to be, in my view, equally thoughtful. You don't want to like spray them with every little update from work. We want to crystallize the main, or main, maybe primary if it's one, or a couple if there are two main things, updates. And like, what was the impact? How does this expand your leadership experience? How does it extend the perspective that you can contribute to the program? How did it shape your leadership style? What impact did you have? You want to think through these deeper MBA themes and layers and leadership layers. Could be inside the office, could be outside the office. That's why I have professional and community written here. Think, again, leadership, impact, promotion, feedback, performance review. What can you show? And mapping it back to Waitlist FAQs, but also map it back to that self-reflection that you underwent. If you were like, gee, I don't know, maybe you never had a promotion and you were worried about that. Maybe you're a little bit of a younger applicant, a little less work experience. And those were things that you said to yourself, or others even told you, you felt light on. Use that as a lens through which you determine what to provide in these updates. If you feel light on leadership, light on extracurriculars, make sure or try to attack. Obviously, you have to have really done these things behind the scenes. But if you now have a little more ammo there from extracurricular involvement or extra professional involvement or leadership or promotions that you didn't have before, and you felt like those were soft spots for you, orient the content of these updates to attack those perceived soft spots in your application. Again, there's a kind of a crystallization here. We want to pinpoint a couple of key things and a couple of key examples. You're not spraying them with updates and badgering them with like, every 3 days with like this happened at work and that happened at work. You're waiting, you're collecting. Maybe this is your first update. You're going to provide your updated GMAT score in 2 weeks later, 2 weeks time. And what you're providing in this update is a 2 or 3 pronged. So you set your action plan. Now it's maybe 10 days to 2 weeks later. Here's your first update from things that have happened, not in the last 10 to 14 days, but have happened since you've applied 2-3 months ago. What do you want to pinpoint? What do you want to say that shows about you or that you've learned? That's why waitlist reviews, they're kind of like essay review, like essay development and essay reviews, waitlist strategy and waitlist reviews, because you want to figure out what's going to go in here, what you want to highlight. And then maybe the GMAT update comes a couple weeks after that. And maybe simultaneously you have somebody sending an extra recommendation if that's allowed, and that sort of thing. Some schools, by the way, will want, if it's like professional updates, they'll want them in an updated resume. But I think most of the time it can take some sort of written form, not too long. Again, crystallized, like specific but concise. Specific but concise. Those are not mutually exclusive. They're hard. That's a hard combination. But that's a combination you deal with all throughout your MBA applications and in your interviews as well. Specific but concise responses. A little bit ironic coming from a guy who's talking for an hour straight here, but that's what we want to hit with these updates as well. These next 3, or let's say these next 3. But these are kind of things that they probably should have happened in your application. Ideally, you would have done these well and specifically in your application and in your interviews. But if you look back, and here's where you might need that extra set of eyes or admission consultant eyes or whatever the case may be. I have seen plenty of instances where an otherwise strong applicant just didn't execute well. They didn't they didn't realize how specific your goals need to be in applications that ask about career goals, or how specific your rationale for why MBA or why that school needs to be in your applications. It feels a little superficial, a little sloppy, a little disengaged. By the way, you're lucky, I think, if that's the case, that they've still waitlisted you. They must like you for other reasons. But here, you're sort of, with these 3 that I'm highlighting here, you're almost kind of giving yourself a redo with it. And so it's looking back on and soliciting feedback regarding the goals that I shared in my application. I would like to develop more. I would like to share, I have over the last 3 months developed more color and specificity around those, and I'd like to take the opportunity to share that here. Now, again, specific but concise. And you got to kind of think about what goes into that. Have you, by the way, if you were interested in consulting but were just really vague about it, did you actually take any steps behind the scenes to further develop the specificity that you're now sharing in the waitlist update? Did you talk to more people? Maybe, hopefully, again, you would have talked to these people beforehand, but maybe you didn't talk to people at the school's consulting club beforehand. Do that here and now share that about how not only did your goals improve, but here's how they did that. Here's how I went about kind of improving the specificity of those goals and engaging with the school. So you're kind of overlapping between some of these, but it's all kind of key and classic parts of MBA application essays and MBA applications. Eyeball those, solicit feedback on them. And if you were light or weak or undeveloped or non-specific or not specific enough in certain parts, goals, why MBA, why that school, maybe your engagement with the school, was light or weak, now you have while you're on the wait list, talk to more people, attend events. That will show the interest. You'll be able to characterize or qualify or describe that in these updates. Since applying, I have seized the opportunity to speak to. You could say who they were, the events that you've attended. You don't just want to like say I did it for the sake of doing it. There should be then another paragraph in there about how that helped you realize or inform, or further develop what had previously been an under articulation of why that school for you, or how you can uniquely contribute. That contribution bullet is written here. I have seen people, again, perhaps if it's permitted, if they under articulated how they believe they can uniquely contribute to a certain school, maybe their why Booth essay was all about what Booth can do for them, and they never in essay 1 or 2 nor in their interview felt like they gave due attention to how they can contribute, how they can pay it forward at Booth, and they still waitlisted you, thankfully. Let's realize that, and now let's take the opportunity after speaking with more and more people. By the way, Booth, I think one of their waitlist videos is actually how you can is sort of along this line. So that would be one vehicle where you could do this. It wouldn't even necessarily be written for Booth. They have a 60-second video option when you're on the waitlist that I believe can do exactly this. But just as as an example, if somebody felt like they under articulated that element in their essays or in their interviews, let's give ourselves another opportunity here to address that. We're not, if you felt like you already did it, maybe it doesn't make your cut for your action plan. And if you felt like you did it well, though, even there, maybe you could come up with another interesting idea. But not everybody is going to need to do all these different things. It's so use specific and situation specific. This is just a menu of options, and even within this menu of options, there's optionality within. Are you going to share how you've further engaged with the MBA program as a vehicle to further articulate why that school for your goals? And then maybe there's another paragraph about contributions. You could figure out how these chess pieces line up, what you're including in discrete updates, and how you're crystallizing those updates so that you're not bombarding the school. You're figuring out these are like the good, small handful of good, healthy, solid, reasonable, non-overwhelming, specific but concise updates that I can offer. I have commitment to attend if accepted written here. That's just some language. It should only be used if true and if valid for you. But if you are totally interested and totally committed to a certain school and you're on the wait list, figure out a way to include verbiage in maybe even your first update, and then somehow reiterate it without being redundant thereafter, that you are committed to attending if fortunate to be accepted. So that's something, just a little, thing that you could figure out whether it's true for you and if and how you want to include it. An additional recommendation only when permitted. So for most schools, you will have submitted 2 MBA recommendations. If a school allows it or doesn't explicitly disallow it, and you have somebody else that can write you some sort of recommendation, if permitted, you could think about that as an option. Endorsements, by the way, a little different than recommendations, and something that one can actually should have thought about beforehand. But if you have a significant contact, somebody who knows you and you know them with depth, a student who's a current first or second year, an alum, a faculty member, again, we want them to know you with depth here. Can't just be somebody met along the way and chatted with for 20 minutes. They should be able to talk about you and why you. So it's like a recommendation light almost. This is something, this exact conversation could be had again 6 or 12 months ago before you apply. Do you have any such contacts at the school? There are some schools out there. I'll use Booth as an example again and Fuqua as an example again here. They both actually have official portals through which a person like this can submit. Booth calls it Shape the Class, and Fuqua has, I think they just call it, an endorsement or referral or something like that. But they both actually have online portals where this can happen. If you have it in your kind of quiver, but didn't use it yet, think about that. And sometimes you actually did build relationships with people at a certain school over time. And a year later, after researching that school and speaking with that person many, many times, a current student actually does feel equipped to endorse you. You were interested in a certain industry, and they, are recruiting in that industry at that school, and you guys spoke a ton of times. They feel like they could put some sort of, endorsement together. They should know you with some substance, though. Again, only when allowed, or if not explicitly disallowed. And again, not everybody's going to do all these things. You're that top bullet. You're reflecting on your soft spots and creating a waitlist action plan. And now there's this series of things that you could piece together. It's going to be different for each person. Potential submission vehicles. Some schools will ask for updated resumes, like if you have meaningful professional updates. Even if they don't ask for it, by the way, and you do have a meaningful enough professional update, you feel free to send an updated resume. I think they would have to be pretty, if you're just changing like a bullet on your resume, that feels a little bit weird. I feel like that, or you got promoted and you're just like adding in a word about the new position. I almost feel like that could be better delivered in an update letter or update email, where you can actually comment then on, why did you get promoted? What does it reveal about you? How are you going to be leading something now that's going to give you interesting experience? Did you finish some big project or client work that you had been working on previously? I feel like if you're able to voice over that a little bit in written text, in an update email or update letter, that's probably more valuable than if you were like just throwing like one little tiny update on a resume. But if you had substantial enough changes to a resume, a big promotion, and now you got a couple of bullets for that promotion, I think that could go into an updated resume. But I can't figure it out. I mentioned the video as a submission vehicle before. Booth requires it, and I've seen it used at other schools as well, kind of creatively and tactically. I'm not saying for everybody to go out there and do that, but it's a consideration if you want to be a little, maybe a little creative or a little different with it. You got to figure out what's going to go in that video, though, and that can take some thought and work. Let's flip over again. By the way, feel free to email info@avantiprep.com if you're interested in waitlist support. We would strategize about what makes sense for you. We're going to probably look at your application to that school, want to talk to you a little bit in situations where probably we have not met you yet, or certainly worked with you beforehand. We want to talk about the waitlist strategy, what updates or overtures you might make, what that action plan should look like for you. And then for anything, that's then like kind of a written or submitted update, we can review those. Other little tactics, by the way, too, like if you take the, when you take the GMAT, maybe this goes without saying, but like update them and attach the score to the email. Or sometimes you're uploading it into the portal. If somebody sent a recommendation or endorsement about you, you probably want to mention that. It couldn't hurt to kind of draw, in one of your other, let's say you're sending that professional update, but that like 5 days ago, or you expect that in the next week or two, some additional recommendation or endorsement is going to be inbound. You should probably have a little language in there and say, it is also my understanding that so-and-so is going to be submitting an additional recommendation or an endorsement on my behalf. Please be on the lookout for that. So you want to be strategic about this and communicative, not overly communicative to the point of badgering, but have your professional antenna up and figure out what that right cadence is. But again, if we're working with you on waitlist support, we would opine on, strategize with you on, and review all of this. We have that discount highlighted there in yellow. You can reference this video to automatically qualify for our lowest hourly services pricing tier, which is a little over a 30% discount relative to if you were just walking through the door and signing up for the first time. Let's see if we have questions in here. We have one question saying in my waitlist FAQs or waitlist instructions, it says to reach out to the Office of Admissions. However, a friend of mine reached out to the admissions staff, and when they did, they got an admit. Interesting. I wonder if that's a typo. It says do not reach out to the Office of Admissions. Maybe is the intent. Let's take it both ways. So the way it's written, the way the question is written, is that in the waitlist it says reach out to the Office of Admissions. However, a friend of mine reached out and got an admit. Would you recommend doing the same? I think there's a word. I think it says it I think it should say that in the waitlist FAQs, it says don't reach out. But if it says to reach out and that you can receive feedback or should engage with the waitlist manager or contact, then absolutely, definitely do that. I think you would look disinterested or uninterested if you didn't do that and you want to get that feedback and you want to get that touch point. I mentioned earlier, it's not an interview, but that's a relationship call, a relationship building call, an impression building call. So yeah, if you are allowed to, it sounds like the person who did it in this case did so, and then, other stuff was going on behind the scenes, I guess, for that school. And that person got accepted right when they reached out. I'm wondering if the intention of the question was to say that the waitlist FAQs say do not reach out, but a friend of mine did that anyway and got an admit. That's a little bit grayer. I think with that, you kind of have to read between the lines, talk to people from previous years who were on the waitlist and really sniff out. It's like kind of a de jure versus de facto situation. De jure meaning what's written in the waitlist FAQs is that you should not reach out. That's probably the default in most cases to adhere to, or at least that's our starting point to adhere to. We should think, though, then, as I talk to other people who were waitlisted in previous years at that school, if de facto now you sort of can, or if you had a relationship that you established with a certain person at admissions beforehand, you could politely ask if it would be possible to chat for a few minutes about how to navigate the waitlist. Just be polite with it and not demanding. And if they're not able to do it, they'd probably tell you no. So that could be kind of the gray area that you're, but if it says don't do it and you talk to 4 people who were on the waitlist in previous years and they're like, yeah, definitely don't reach out to the school to talk about it, then you definitely should not. But you might find a couple, I would say they're more the exception than the rule. You might find a couple of situations like this where it says don't reach out, but you sort of kind of can or politely can, or maybe if you already had an existing relationship. Waitlist for Kellogg Triple M, which starts in May. Yeah, so that's tough. That's I think with that, the goal is, all right, I know that starts in May. I better it's hard to be on that wait list because whatever updates you are going to submit, you kind of want to do it soon. So whatever the timeline is that I've described, I think you just got to collapse that and attack that. And, what do we have? Probably 5-6 weeks or something until that program starts, or 6-7 weeks. So are you going to, one a week? So do what you can. If you think your score is the thing that's holding you back, try to jump on that right away. You probably don't have time to take coursework. Look at when the deposit deadline is going to be, or try to figure out when they would need to know. That's another thing, by the way, to look at is deposit deadlines for schools. When do round 2 applicants need to submit their deposits? Because that's when the school is going to find out. They don't always do it exactly this way, but that's when the school is going to find out who's coming and who isn't. So if you have material updates, significant updates that you want to get in, I think especially in this case, when the program starts soon, you have to just kind of accelerate or front load the waitlist process. And I really probably would look at that deposit deadline. What are the deadline? But so who else got into when is Kellogg going to find out who that they've just accepted for the Triple M program is actually coming versus who's not? And hopefully I got my updates in before then, so that my waitlist updates in before then, so that once they see who's coming or not coming, I've already got my waitlist up. Now they're looking, to fill spots, and they have my updated score, or they have my updated whatever. So I think you just got to kind of front load or accelerate. Kellogg discourages new rec letters, but it's not explicitly prohibited. Would you rather not risk upsetting them? If it's discouraged, I feel like the read between the lines on that is it. And here's where we get into such differences from school to school. But if it's discouraged, I would probably look at other options on this big kind of menu here. And again, we're reading between the lines. Even I'd almost want to like see it or look at it, but you're sort of reading between the lines there too of like, well, does that apply to more of an informal or brief endorsement? I usually think of those as separate. Like a recommendation is like a full and proper recommendation, and if they discourage or prohibit that, you don't do it. But an endorsement, I think, is more gray and more informal and shorter. If you have a material and significant, if the alum or student can knows you truly, it doesn't mean they should write something this long or write something that would be as long as an actual recommendation, but something of some substance. You might as well try. I mean, when you get into these gray areas, a little bit of it is like, the program starts in May. I'm running out of time. How many swings of the bat am I going to get here? I have enough time to like, if I'm going to front load my waitlist process, I have enough time to like, and I'm going to want to try to do it before other people pay their deadline. I have a few weeks here to like, a couple weeks to like try to retake the test, send one update from work and one endorsement, or like one, last ditch, like why Kellogg for you, why you for Kellogg kind of thing. But I usually bifurcate recommendations and endorsements, but you kind of have to like read between the lines and try to talk to people from previous years who were on the wait list. Anderson and Tepper asked me to share updates from or changes to my applications. What can I do to improve my chances at these schools? I think we've basically covered that. You have this list of options here. You got to think about the soft spots in your own profile and then filter or tailor your updates to attack or address. Filter or tailor your updates and filter or tailor your action plan to address those soft spots. Any additional coursework for verbal? Gee, that is, I have a low verbal score but a Q45 and HBX Core E 68th percentile. Now, those feel like low quant. I don't know what school we're talking about here. Those feel like low quant scores to me. Q45 and 68th percentile. I don't know what range of schools we're dealing with here. I feel like the quant probably needs to be addressed, just looking at those numbers in a vacuum. If I'm low on verbal, I don't know if it's so much additional coursework. I think it depends also, are you applying from outside the US? If so, could you look at like a TOEFL to try to address that? Like a lower verbal score. A lower verbal score when you have a quant 45 on the GMAT and a 68th percentile in HBX Core E accounting, I would probably address the quant. If I were from out of country or a non-English speaking undergrad or non-English speaking country, and you weren't, maybe, I don't know, maybe you weren't required to, maybe you took your university studies in English, so you weren't required to take the TOEFL, but your verbal's low, and you feel like it might look a little like, I don't know, you feel suspect somehow, then maybe I've seen people take the TOEFL to kind of say like, look, I know my verbal was low, and even though I took my undergraduate studies in an English-speaking environment, I haven't worked in an English-speaking environment. I took the TOEFL as to provide an extra signal or extra kind of context regarding what I believe to be my, English language capabilities. I know it's not a perfect comp for like the verbal, but I don't really see people taking like extra coursework for verbal. I think there are some situations where you have kind of like a strangely low verbal score, in particular, maybe against somebody where English is not the primary language, and maybe they didn't work in an English speaking environment. So you want to give the school comfort regarding like English competency, and the verbal is low because of, again, second, third language, and understandably, by the way. I mean, this stuff is hard to do in languages that are not somebody's first. But yeah, the quant there looks more actionable to me, but there are these specific cases again where you might want to do things on the verbal side, but that doesn't mean coursework. What could be done to offset a low GPA? Or what if my goals, let's see if we can, I got a lot of questions here. Low GPA, again, probably something we would have wanted to attack a year ago, maybe something you might need to attack if the waitlist doesn't turn out as a reapplicant this fall. I think, we got to look at what's the cause, like what's your major, what's the cause of the low GPA? Was it specific underperformance in certain types of courses? In such a short time frame on the waitlist, I'd almost want to know what your GMAT score is. It's like, if you have a low GPA, is your GMAT score already really, really high and now you're waitlisted? If it's not really, really high, you're more of a like low GPA average for your applicant pool candidate. Getting a high GMAT is a nice fix for a low GPA. It doesn't make the low GPA go away, but it can be kind of an impressive gesture and a nice gesture. If you, I don't know, don't have the belly for retaking the GMAT, maybe something like an HBX Core E could be looked at. I don't know if you'll have the runway here to like sign up for a full course. You got to kind of look at what the different options are, what the durations are, but those would be, yeah, I think here you want to look at what people would call building an alternate transcript, but you're trying to do that in a condensed period. So whereas somebody who's applying like a year and a half from now, fall of 2023, we could talk and we could line up like 4 courses for them to take, and all like full credit grad level courses to correct. They got a D in stats. Well, let's have you take grad level stats and get an A in it. You got a C in calculus. Let's have you take grad level and do the same thing. Or maybe you took stats and calc and you did fine, but you never took any, you were an engineer and you never took any business courses. Let's actually take those discrete courses and figure out and line up a couple of those. That though is hard to do. That would even be somebody I'm talking to who's, applying 6 months from now, they could do that. Or certainly 18 months from now, they could do that. The full courses are a little tough to do now when you're on a wait list. I think it's probably more like a workshop style course vehicle, like an HBX Core E, and or taking retaking the GMAT. If my goals iterated something that was difficult for internationals to achieve, could I submit something that, positions a more realistic goal? Yeah, I think absolutely that would be kind of in this clarifying or enhancing your goals category. Having further reflected on and further researched or further spoken with people and solicited that feedback, you'd like to offer an update regarding your goals. Maybe the goals that you shared in your application, they still are your aspirational goals, but this research you've done and these paths you've gone down have kind of illuminated the fact that those are difficult for international students, and say why. So I would like to offer the following. I have developed over the past several weeks kind of like an alternate plan or a simultaneous plan, or something that I'm going to pursue at the same time from a recruiting perspective that still fits with your skill set and your interests, but is, you believe, more aligned with recruiting at that school and the companies that recruit at that school and success for international. So I think that risks looking a little weird if like the new thing is really different than the previous thing, but maybe they could be somehow interconnected. Maybe even what you put in there originally could still be framed as your aspirational, but you understand it's hard to do or hard to get. So here's something else, almost like a backup plan. Waitlisted, Kellogg MBAI. My post MBA goal is to go into product management. Is it beneficial to enroll in an online program which helps individuals switch into a product management career, such as Rocket Blocks or PM School? Here, I think we have another situation where it depends on what your own background or experiences are to this point. You do see a lot of individuals, whether it's for MBAI or just people who go into regular MBA programs who want to go into product management, but don't have any kind of related computer science, programming, engineering background. A lot of times, by the way, I see with product management as a goal, people have not, I'm not saying you did this, the person who asked the question, but I do see a lot of people in general who want to go into product management who have really under-researched what that means and what goes into that. I'm not saying that you've done that, but a lot of product, like the scope of product management jobs out there post MBA, some of them are really technical and some of them are not a little less, let's say less technical. Some of them have pretty significant prerequisites in terms of what your computer science background is. And in goals, if somebody then is articulating product management goals, you want to show the admissions committee that you already know and have an understanding at a granular level of like, which are the types of PM roles out there that actually do hire people with your background? If you're targeting jobs that have some sort of more technical prerequisite, the MBA, especially a lot of MBA programs now have some elements or some electives that can fill that, but not really to the level that would be enough to get you the job. You kind of want to think about your own profile. And now taking it back to this question, if I lack those PM chops or those technical chops, maybe I do need to take one of these other courses. I'm not specifically familiar with the two that are mentioned in the question, but if they are doable, if you feel like you do lack that PM type background that makes your goals for that program and post MBA more credible and is going to make you more hireable, then you could certainly look at multi-week type schools and say that you've signed up and say how that's going to fit in and say what gap you think you have and say how you're interested in product management roles post MBA at this company and this company and this company, and based on the conversations you've had and research you've done, these two companies tend to hire more technical PMs and this one tends to hire a wider scope of backgrounds, in order to make yourself competitive at the ones both in the program and at the ones that hire to give yourself a chance with those ones that hire technical PMs. I've enrolled in such and such a program. So you can think about it, but you got to look at like, how long do those take? Is it enough time? And figure that out. Booth tells me to only update with a video, which I already did, about what is their values that's closest to me. Am I doomed? I don't know if you're doomed. I mean, it sounds like you did what you were asked to do. Booth's main update engine is the video, the 60-second video. And now there's time. So here's where a couple of things I mentioned over the course of the video might come into play. First is, now try to sleuth around. Like, just because you submitted the video doesn't mean you're going to get an answer right away. They're going to collect those. And then, I think usually a little bit before their deposit deadline, or right around there, you got to look at the exact timing is so different from school to school. Sleuth around on like past waitlist boards for Booth and see what the timing is. But also, as you sleuth around, try to talk to people who are on Booth waitlists in the past. I think a lot of times you're going to see in those chats, in those forums, if you talk to people, another overture of some variety, not a wasted one, not one where you're forcing it or just sending them something because you're sending it to them. But if you've made real progress, if you have really interesting contribution ideas that you could give, not a novel, but some sort of other overture, I think you will probably see And here's a little bit of that read between the lines of the waitlist FAQs. They require the video. What do they otherwise not allow or allow? Sniff around, because I think you're probably going to find that there are some people out there who just submitted the video and got in off the wait list. There are others out there who submitted the video and maybe made one other sort of overture, as long as it was like a true blue update or something of real substance. But that, I think you're going to want to read the tea leaves from people who have gone down that road at the school. Last question here. I'm waitlisted at HBS. My post-MBA goal is entrepreneurship. I have 3 years of work experience and a 324 GRE. The GRE, and here we have to kind of it's hard to just diagnose off of blurb. The GRE feels a little low to me for HBS. And again, you have to always, this again is hard to know also, but you got to control for that or evaluate GRE or GMAT scores in specific context of applicant pool. So, okay, it's not, the number on its own is not, and these numbers move around and they vary so wildly from school to school. Like 324, I'm pretty sure was Wharton's average GRE score a couple of years ago. Booth, Harvard is only, I think, a little bit above that. But if you feel like in your, let's pull up the exact number here. So 327 is the average on the current class profile page at HBS. 163 verbal, 164 quant, 327. You're at 324. 3 ticks below is sizable. I mean, 3 ticks the other way and you're at 330. So that does jump out to me a little bit, especially if you feel like you're in an overrepresented applicant pool, where the score is probably even going to be a little higher than that. So that's something to look at. Again, we have to kind of then consider that. It's hard to do beyond just a blur, but like consider that in context of your applicant pool, of your what is your quant and your verbal. What did you major in, and what's your GPA? Like, is my quant low, but my GPA is high? But I think on its face, I would feel like boosting that GRE score would be helpful. And then, all of the other kind of self-evaluation and mapping was my goal like under-articulated? My entrepreneurial idea, was it vague or just directional, not specific enough? The resources that you're going to have at HBS to mobilize that, but that's such an individual diagnosis thing and depends on what's in the app. But self-reflect, analyze, solicit feedback. Think about this menu that's up on the screen there now. But I do think that the GRE there, 324, 3 ticks below, I've actually kind of been planning to do a little bit of like a standard deviation analysis on the GRE side. It feels on one hand like just I'm 3 digits below HBS's average GRE, but 3 digits the other way, you're at 330, and that's considered a high GRE score. 3 more digits below your current score, you're at 321, which is like kind of considered a lower score. So we'd have to do a little bit of like a standard deviation analysis, but I think those are 3 pretty big ticks, especially if you feel like you're from an applicant pool where the scores are a little bit higher. So that does jump out to me a little bit. And I know that stinks because retaking tests is not fun. But it can be, and if it really depends on your level of interest in the program. This is not just for the person who asked this question, but for everybody. You got to think about, how badly do I want to go here? Do I want to know how much more MBA app work do I have in my stomach, or can I stomach? How much more do I want to run through this gauntlet? By the way, congratulations to all of you. I don't say it facetiously, and I know it stinks and it doesn't provide any solace, but congratulations on being waitlisted at Harvard, and congratulations at being waitlisted at Booth. These are really, really, really tough schools, and it stinks because you feel like you're just kind of right there and you're on the precipice. If you can stomach, a few more weeks of activity or one more go with the test, go for it. Yeah, try to view it through the lens of silver lining and what you can do from an action step perspective. By the way, for the booth waitlisted applicant that asked the question, am I doomed? Like, you submitted the video, but I don't know what your GMAT score is or your GPA or if you're missing coursework or whatever. Those are black and white steps that you could also take. If your GMAT score was fringe or something, you could also retake the GMAT. Try to throw that in there. All right, we'll make this the last question. If I reapply to a school where the year before I was late waitlisted, do my chances in reapplying increase? Not explicitly, but not explicitly, but if they waitlisted you the year before, they liked you somehow. So most schools with reapplicants, they view you neutrally, let's say. They're neither give you an advantage nor a disadvantage. I think that if you were waitlisted, there's I gotta use the word silver lining again here. There's a silver lining in that they liked you enough to waitlist you the year before. And there was just something in there that wasn't all the way clicking. Maybe it was a score, maybe it was a sub score, maybe it was something with coursework, maybe it was something during undergrad. So I would say the general answer to that is it's neutral. But there's like kind of a nice little silver lining in there, as long as though you've thought about and acted on that. Like if you're going back to them with the exact same everything, you were waitlisted and you're going back to them with the exact same everything, then starts neutral. If you're going back to them with the same exact everything, I don't see why the result would change this time. And they'd be like, well, we waitlisted him and he didn't change anything or improve anything. If we waitlisted him and we liked him enough to waitlist him, but one or two things weren't clicking, and now he addressed those things, and he bolstered his application, and look at how he's strived forward. That feels like it leans positive to me. It doesn't mean necessarily that like you're by that token, it's not that you just being a waitlisted applicant who's reapplying is what increases your chances. It's what you do to kind of take another step forward that would increase your chances. And you'd know in the back of your head, they liked me enough to waitlist me. So now maybe I'm in pretty decent position here as long as I take those other steps forward. The questions keep coming in. A Haas question, my alma mater. I'm on the wait list for Haas. My GRE score is Quant 168. Do I need to retake the test to try to get a higher Quant? That one I would say no, I don't think so. That 168 is a nice, really nice and high Quant score. If you go to Haas's class profile page, you'll see that the median GRE Quant score at Haas is 162. The middle 80% range, 10th percentile to 90th percentile, is 155 to 168. So you are at the top end of the middle 80% range. That's a 90th percentile among the current MBA class at Haas, and the people who took the GRE. You'd have a 90th percentile GRE Quant score. So I think in that case, no, it does not feel like you would look. In your case, we'd probably want to look, I don't know what the rest of the GRE looks like and the rest of the academic profile looks like, but you would want to look at, these other things that are on this menu here up on the page. So I thank you all for your time today. Nice long session. I know they run long and a lot of talking, but hopefully the information is thorough and helpful. I do really try to go. It's so easy in this application universe, and in this business, I guess you could say, from the angle from my side of things, it's very easy to just like throw cliches out there and like say, okay, go for it. But I think that the magic or the needle movement, whether it's during your application process, your profile building, your application process, or now when you're on the wait list, the devil is in the details. And we need to wrestle with those details, map them to a certain school, and then execute and deliver them. And even when you're reviewing those, the devil's in the details. What do I want to highlight? When do I want to send it? All that kind of stuff. So I do hope that the depth is helpful and is a little bit of an indication. I think if you go out there and read those testimonials, the link is up there on the page. If you go out there and read the testimonials about Avanti Prep, it is what you'll see reputationally for myself and for us, myself and our senior consultants. And I think you will see, differentiation in terms of results as a result of that committed, detailed, thorough, action-oriented, not just kind of cliche approach. So I wish you all the best of luck. I thank you again for joining. Please do feel free to email if you're interested in some potential waitlist support, waitlist strategy and update, or overture reviews. We would kind of wrestle together everything that I went through today. If you reference this video, you automatically qualify for our lowest hourly services pricing tier, which is a 30+%, little over 30% discount relative to if you were just, coming in as a new applicant. So thank you again. Have a great day. Wish you all the best of luck on your waitlist journey and application journey. If things don't work out, by the way, we're hoping they do. But if they don't and you're not in elsewhere and you're reapplying, please also feel free to reach out, of course, on that token as well. So I think we can wrap things up. And I thank you again. Good luck. Have a great day.